The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, and thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I feel a calmness coming across some of you in this setting. And sometimes he makes us lie down for a little rest, fellowship with others. And we're in green pastures here. Down south, they'd say tall cotton. And he leadeth me beside the still waters. Beautiful lake out front. And when you come together for times like this, you regain the strength to go back and fight the battles. And all of us have different battles. I don't know of anyone that doesn't have a few problems here and there. And about the time you get them straightened out, you get a couple more pop up. It's life. But thank the Lord for times like this. I'm glad for the United Pentecostal Church for the fellowship along with the truth that we're a part of. Can we give the Lord a hand clap for giving us friends and fellowship in the kingdom? Thank you, Brother Putnam and the Caskey and the district board for giving me this honor and privilege of being here. Counting up the number of churches in the manual, I didn't quite expect so many here today. They're going to be handing out some things here, and I want to make sure every pastor gets a booklet for the United Pentecostal Foundation, and as many others as I have enough, they'll hand those out to you. It is a booklet like this, and I want to make sure every pastor, but after that, other ministers who are here, you can also have any that are left over. I have a total of 100. Hopefully it'll go a long ways, and if not, why, give me your name and address, and I'll be glad to send you one. God bless you. You may be seated. I have met several of my former college friends, and the striking thing, what are you grinning about, Brother Richardson? It's amazing. I counted up. It's been 40 years ago. I don't know what's happened, but it has just gone by just so rapidly. And for all of my World Evangelism Center comrades, it's good to be with you as well. All of you wonderful pastors and ministers of the state of Wisconsin. One of the experiences that I draw on many times is the fact that I searched my heart many different times trying to know for sure what God's perfect will was. But you folks confused me one time. Most of you are aware that my wife and I spent 26 years. She spent 24 years. Between us, 50 years working at the Tupelo Children's Mansion. When we got married, she was working for the Assemblies of the Lord Jesus Christ Children's Home called Blue Mountain. And I was employed at the Children's Mansion, and when we got married, she had the oldest girl from Blue Mountain stand up with her. I had the oldest boy from the Children's Mansion stand up with me. We had 100 kids at our wedding, and maybe 50 adults, I don't know. And so we came home from our honeymoon, and we immediately were parents to 22 boys. I don't recommend that as a way to start your marriage. I can tell you that. But our lives were very rich with traveling this nation, to raise the funds and to meet so many of you to fulfill God's call in our life at that time. One of the trips that I made was to your district conference many years ago when there were 25, 30 churches. And I left there confused about whether I was supposed to stay at the children's mansion or come here and start a church, because you were so passionate about winning the lost. Now, I don't say that against my call. I want to just tell you, you gave that passion to me when I arrived here and was here through your district conference of how you need to reach the community of the state of Wisconsin. And I commend you for that so very, very much. And obviously, you've done a great job. I thank you for giving me the privilege to be back in this kind of an atmosphere of that kind of a setting. My history, of course, is with the Children's Mansion. My wife and I were over it as president for 23 years. We had the privilege of raising over 1,000 children. And frankly, we were tired when we left. Just put it real frank. We were exhausted, and that was time for us to go on and let somebody else younger and ready for a challenge. And I received a call from Brother Haney. I had pastored in Arkansas for 3 years, and he asked me to come to headquarters to start up the stewardship department. It had not been in existence for almost 30 years. I never wanted to work at headquarters. I never wanted to move to St. Louis. But I'm doing what God wanted me to do, and I'm happy. When you do what God wants you to do, it doesn't matter where He calls you. You find the peace and contentment. And I have found a wonderful set of comrades to work with, and we are having fun. But one of the things the Lord dealt with me about many years ago was that the end of my life would be more productive than the first. Now, if you've raised 1,000 kids, you can't get much more productive than that, you know. So I didn't think I'd ever be worth it. Matter of fact, depression set in on me after I left there, because I just couldn't imagine doing anything that would affect lives that much more than what we had done. And I felt like my whole life had just gone away. But I have discovered, as we have gained our strength back and our energy back, that what God has called me to do is going to affect every one of our churches, affect every department of the United Pentecostal Church in every district. And now I understand why God gave me those experiences in the past to prepare me for the present. And I'm not very good at it, I'm sure, but I'm doing the best I can, and that's all God expects us to do. And I think you're going to hear some interesting things here today. I want to use one scripture as my premise. If you would go with me to the book of 1 Timothy, the 5th chapter and the 8th verse. And while you're going there, I have been refreshed this week to also meet so many of you that are a part of my other passion, and that is New Beginnings. Evelyn and I started New Beginnings 19 years ago, and we've had the privilege of having the only unwed mother's home in the state of Mississippi, and we help crisis pregnancy girls from all over the United States. They've still allowed me to stay chairman of the board, and I'm very involved with that. We just built a new international office. It's over $500,000, and individuals have funded every bit of it. We only owe about $200,000, and we have a promise of someone thinking of finishing paying that off. So we're just counting our wonderful blessings that God is doing. We have adopted almost 500 children into apostolic homes. We have met several of you who have grandchildren who have been adopted, nephews who have been adopted, and what an exciting, and some children who have been adopted. Where is Brother Jans here today? Okay. Anyway, we just so many of you that it's fun to be connected to you through that. I believe every child, and I mean it, every child deserves a forever family. A forever family. Someone they can be connected to. 1 Timothy 5 and 8. But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. Now, let me dissect that just a little bit. If any provide not, that means you've got to do some work. I heard the word work here a while ago with an office. Being a father, a mother, a pastor, a pastor's wife, whatever it is that God calls you to do, it is W-O-R-K. You have to work by the sweat of your brow to provide. Everyone say, I must provide. And the scripture makes it clear that you are responsible to provide for your own. There is no welfare mentality that belongs in the church. We're all to participate in making it better. The provisions. God expects us. We don't need to expect the United States government to take care of us as a church. Uh-oh. We're due to do whatever it takes to make this thing go. Anyone believe that? Would you say amen? Amen? And even for our own households, especially those of our own house. Now, Brother Putnam, I called you Brother Putnam. You know why? You're my brother. We have been born into the same household of faith. So it's not only providing for my own household, Evelyn, and my 3 children. I'm also to help provide by the sweat of my brow for the kingdom of God, my brothers and sisters, the missionaries, the home missionaries that came up here, the foreign missionaries who are here, that God calls. We are to provide for the family. And he who doesn't, I don't like the sentence here, against us if we don't. It says, if you haven't, you have denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. You look that word infidel up, it says unbeliever. Whoa. So if you aren't making good provisions and good plans of provision, this scripture is really saying you have denied the faith and you're worse than an unbeliever. Now, some of you might not want to hear what all I have to say. I'm going to give you the statistics a little bit later on about the number of scriptures that talk about finance versus the number of scriptures that talk about love and baptism and prayer. Because finance gets to be a touchy subject. And so I'm going to speak to you today on what I have entitled Financial Stewardship, Estate and Gift Design, and Retirement Planning. Now, I know we have until 7 o'clock, and I will cut off before then, even if I'm not finished. Now, Brother Sindler at Tharp, where are you? Thorpe, you know, it came all the way down to St. Louis about that horrible storm that happened the first weekend in March. You being from Georgia, you know, you weren't quite aware of all that storm coming and what it was going to do. He shows up ready to speak. And no one comes to the church at Tharp except old Farmer Johansson. And about 30 minutes, he just waited and waited. Nobody else come. And finally, Brother Johansson said to him, Pastor, aren't you going to go ahead with the service? He said, well, I was waiting for a few more to come. And the old farmer, Johansson, said, you know, if only one cow shows up, I still feed him. Being from Georgia, he wasn't quite aware of that little farm understanding, but he soon got an understanding, and he started the service and had the worship and the singing, and then all of a sudden started the preaching. And after about an hour, finally, Brother Johansson got up, said, Pastor, said, you know, if they don't all show up, I don't leave the whole load of food. Well, I'm not probably going to get to everything here today, but I want to give you an understanding as much as I can. And I am prepared to follow up after tomorrow's business session with the rest of it if necessary, or I can give you an example of what I actually do when I come to churches, if that should be what we need to do. The stewardship department provides education and tools for biblical stewardship through publications, seminars, and programs. And these include, but are not limited to, estate planning, major gift planning, and I will talk about that later, family budgeting and debt management, home foreclosure salvation, those that are about to lose their homes, ways that we can assist them. The other component of the stewardship department is that we started the United Pentecostal Foundation. We needed a place where we could manage the monies that are put aside for the future in regard to the ministries. You see, when the Lord left the parable talking about the owner going away to a far country, and he gave to the servant, the steward, his assets. He said, you manage them while I'm gone, and when I come back, I'm going to ask you what you did with it. That's exactly what stewardship is. We've all preached that the Lord has gone to a far country to prepare a place for us, that where he is, we're going to be there also. But you know what? Sometimes it doesn't happen with the trumpet that's going to be. Instead, he takes some of us in the meantime. And he's going to ask us, Brother Davis, what did you do with the time and the talent and the treasure I trusted you with while I was gone? And the ultimate, of course, is to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant, come on in. Now, I'm into hugs. Many of you that I greeted here today, I gave you a hug. You don't raise 1,000 kids and not learn how to hug. I can tell you that. But the best hug I want is from my Savior saying, Steve, well done, thou good and faithful steward or servant. And the one that multiplied what God gave. And you see, in the foundation, what you put aside to make a difference for the kingdom is there to make money, and it keeps doing it over and over again. Should the Lord tarry, it is multiplying what God trusted you with while here on this earth. So that's the reason we started it. It is to provide management and investment of major gifts that include charitable gift annuities, donor advised funds, a charitable lead and remainder trusts, scholarships, endowments for divisions, for departments, districts, local assemblies, endorsed project, and individual members and families of the United Pentecostal Church International. I'm going to be saying a lot of things here today that may be new territory for you, but we must start educating our churches and our constituency what is available to make a difference in the long term for the kingdom of God. Today, we're going to present financial steward issues of our church and the members today. I will tell you that I personally believe that pastors do not need to be afraid to address the issues. There are scriptural answers and tools available to help your church members who are struggling with financial issues. Perhaps the issue starts in the minister's home first. Uh-oh. Have you learned to manage what God has trusted you with? Do you live above your means? Is it all right if am I honest with you? Estate and major gift planning, how to educate through seminars, to provide tools to complete estate plans that properly care for families and their legal needs. And then retirement planning for ministers. I put this down here. Ministers must plan for retirement. Now, we're not going to take a vote here today or a show of hands of how many of you have properly planned early enough for retirement. But I hope by the time I finish here today, some of you will leave determined to plan better and plan for more. The first part of it, the first bale of hay, is going to be the financial stewardship issues of our church members today. Too many churches only get interested in teaching generosity and giving truths when there is an offering need, a church budget crisis, or a building project in the church. We don't do teaching about it until there is a crisis. And if you worry about your finances personally in your own home until there's a crisis, you're in trouble for a long time. I have discovered that many of us ministers do not feel comfortable addressing the issue of how to teach our congregations about the issues of money. With more than 2,300 verses in the Bible on finances, generosity, and material possessions, I think God obviously intends for his people to learn his ways. Everyone say his ways. In these matters so that they can glorify God with their time, their talent, their treasure, and they live in financial peace. The truth is, our church members are in trouble. Not with your spiritual leadership, but with their finances. There is a record number of bankruptcies happening, and they're happening even in our churches. Out of control credit card spending. I have a little personal theory about that. One of the reasons that we aren't blessed when we buy things on credit card is because we are borrowing against what God has even given to us to manage. And you've never paid tithes on it. You're living above God's provision. And anytime we go above God's provision, we're going to find ourselves in trouble. Materialism is rampant. What is it somebody once said? You're trying to keep up with the Joneses that you don't even really know and you don't even like. Why is it that we have to go out and buy a bunch of new clothes before General Conference? Who cares? Uh-oh. Just a thought. Put it on a credit card and why? Why put yourself in that kind of a debt load? But if we as ministers do that, how can we expect our families in our church to stay out of debt? Giving patterns are at 30-year lows. You're saying, oh, our giving in our church is great. How many aren't giving in your church, percentage-wise? I pastored enough years to know that about 25-30% of those on the roll never gave anything. Oh. And you know, I've been a few churches since I've been traveling the last 5 years. I have found some have board members and people on the platform who don't give. And you're asking for troubles when you do that. Because leadership should be the example. I want to just show you the U.S. Bankruptcy Court of the Western District of Wisconsin. Now, this is only half of your state. There were over close to 13,000 bankruptcies in the year 2005. Now, I don't know what you did in 2006, if you shot them or what, but they went way down. But it's unusual for something to go down that far. Maybe they just didn't finish all the statistics. But notice where it was. We are in trouble as a nation because we have taught our people through all the marketing and the advertising, just refinance your house, get the money out of it, spend it for a vacation, and start all over again. And then when you're ready to retire, you don't have a house that's paid for, and you're constantly in trouble. We need to learn to live within our means. Your church members desperately need direction from God's owner manual, the Bible. Too many of us were taught sacrifice, but not stewardship. Whoa. give. And is it wrong? Oh, absolutely not. But you know, there's other scriptures in there that says you need to save up for the winter months. Remember 1 Timothy 5:8. He who provides not for his own has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. I don't want to get to the point of retirement and Evelyn and I have to depend on somebody else to take care of us because I have not provided for my wife and myself. Now, I know this isn't a preaching message, but it's preaching. Financial problems are the number one contributor to marital stress and divorce. You pastors who deal with the issues of families all the time, you hear it constantly. Financial pressure, the stress that it causes in a home. And I'm going to tell you what, when you don't teach it to stay out of debt in your church, you don't live it by example, there is stress that happens, and then when God's Spirit moves in upon them, they are not free to really worship the way they should and have relationships with their companion the way they should because they have debt controlling them. And they're not free. You really want revival? Start teaching people to get out of debt, and they're free and free indeed, spiritually and financially. But you have to set the pace. 70% of credit card holders carry $6,000 to $7,000 in unpaid balances. College seniors now average 4 credit cards with unpaid balances of $4,134, and 81% of college students have them. 40% are concerned about their non-mortgage debt payments. This came from the Milwaukee Journal. 47% of high school seniors failed U.S. Basic Money Management Test. You know, it doesn't hurt for us if we're going to teach about keeping our families' lives morally pure. Why don't we also talk about keeping our financial matters above board? There is a 30-year decline in the percent Christians give. This was taken by the Lilly-funded study by Empty Tomb, and it's 1.5% to 3.5% less constantly that people are giving than they used to give. Now, I found out another statistic. It's from Brian Kluth, and I'll give you his information here in a few minutes. He says the average credit card debt is $8,400. Social Security income average is $895 a month at retirement. And they tell us that almost 60% of Americans do not plan for any retirement and try to live on this $895 a month when they retire. Many U.S. families and churches are 1 to 2 months away from a financial crisis. What if a financial crisis happens in your church? What if the plants, 2 or 3 of them in your community, close down? Are you as a church so far in debt that you'll be in trouble? It's all right, Brother Putnam, for me to talk this way? But here are some interesting facts. $41 trillion in inheritance will be transferred to the baby boomer generation in the next 10 to 20 years. 91% of a person's assets are non-liquid. That's in insurance, house, rental properties, etc. 7 out of 10 adults die without a will, or a trust, or an estate plan. And guess how much of that estate is going to go to your local assembly or to the kingdom of God? Nothing. the biggest charity in America. The U.S. government's going to get it. 90% of denominations offer no available or limited financial teaching resources to their pastors or churches. This is from Christian Stewardship Association of America. 90% of denominations offer no or limited financial teaching resources to their pastors or churches. So even though we feel like we're far behind, at least we're starting off to do something more about it. This is interesting. 85% of pastors feel unequipped and uncomfortable teaching on finances and giving. This is from Lilly Foundation studies. How many of you pastors, don't raise your hand, feel uncomfortable teaching your congregation about money management issues? 90% of churches have no active plan for teaching biblical financial principles. Again, from Christian Stewardship Association. 20 to 35% of church attendee giving records are blank. And you know what? If you base it upon giving, that many of them are going to be blank. But if you would ever teach them about stewardship, it changes the whole paradigm of understanding that God is the owner of all, not them. They are just managing it. And instead of going home after service and looking how much they have in their checkbook and in their retirement account and in their name, it all belongs to Him. And God is just letting them manage it. And you want to make sure what was never yours to begin with goes back to Him immediately. You see, when you get a paycheck, really 90% of it's yours to manage. 10% of it was never yours to manage. And when you teach it from a stewardship standpoint versus a giving standpoint, it has a whole different understanding in their hearts and their spirits. I want to give you a few statistics in 1999. I need to do a little research and bring this up to date. But in 1999, $3 billion was given to Christian mission agencies. $58 billion was spent for soda. $24 billion for jewelry. $8 billion in movies, $13 billion chocolate products, $38 billion vending machine sales, $11 billion for computer video games, $7 billion for greeting cards, $23 billion for toys, and catch this, $91 billion in lawn garden industry, and $23 billion on pets, and only $3 billion for missions. Where is our priority as a nation? The New Testament. How much of it deals with stewardship and management? 1 out of every 6 verses. 1/2 of all parables. We love preaching on baptism. I saw you all get excited about it a while ago about the Messianic Jews getting baptized, and what a wonderful thing that is, because that's what doctrine is all about. That's what reaching souls is all about. We talk about prayer, and there's 275 verses on prayer. There's 350 on faith, 650 on love, but there are 2,350 verses that relate specifically to finances and material possessions. Seems like the Lord knew we were going to have a little problem with this. Now, I've been around long enough that a lot of folks, when the pastor presents, we're going to have a new building program. How many want to see this new building up? Everybody pretty much will raise their hands, but they never can get it back here to their pocketbook when it comes to giving. Not everybody. But you see, we haven't taught enough on stewardship and management. Because when you're free financially and then God talks to you, you don't have to worry about where you're going to survive the next day. I'm going to give you a few resources if you want to write these down. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later. One of them is Crown Ministries. Our website is www.crown.org. Another one is www.daveramsey.com. There are resources at our own publishing house. And then the next one is a very important one that if you've never discovered this, I really want you to think about looking at this website. It's called Maximum Generosity. A pastor of a denominational church, Brian Cluth, has made it his passion to provide teaching materials to pastors and ministers in regard to finances. He has unbelievable amounts of resources available to you that you could use from every type and scenario that would be a blessing to you. That's www.maximumgenerosity.org. Let's first of all go to Crown Ministries. I am convinced one of the good things that you could do for your congregation is to start teaching biblical financial stewardship. You can do this through Crown Ministries, and we have not put together our own program, and sometimes I believe as long as something is working that's good, why invent and spend your time on something else when something works? So that I have enough of other challenges right now not to put one together, just United Pentecostal, because this is interdenominational and it's talking about scriptural basis of financial management. They have documented statistics about the help that this will give. They encourage you to memorize scriptures that deal with finance, daily devotions, people to double their giving, avoid and eliminate debt, and develop a budget. And they teach that a faithful steward will avoid debt, will seek counsel before they purchase things, practice honesty, give generously, spend wisely, work hard, save consistently, and start off by training your children. One of the things that my kids learned a long time early in our life was each of them had their own budget from the time they were little. And I put money in there and I taught them how to keep the individual control sheet, and they had a sheet for their own clothes, they had a sheet for their own entertainment, they had a sheet for their own whatever, I can't remember now what all of it was, and they would learn to spread that out. And when they wanted to go out extra with a group after church, how much do you have in your checking account? How much is in? I did this from the time they were 7 and 8 years old. When we went on vacation, I got the money out in bills, and I gave each of them a tablet and gave them a pencil and said, okay, you're going to manage all the money while we're on vacation. And well, they saw those $100 bills and they thought they were rich. I said, but now here it is. You're going to have to figure this out. We're going to be gone for 10 days. And this is how much gas is going to cost. And I made them figure up how far it was. I made them learn how to divide the miles per gallon that the vehicle was getting and then multiply it by the cost per gallon and come up with how much it was going to cost for gas. And each one of them, I made them figure it out. And then we figured up how much food was going to cost, how much the motel was going to cost. And then I taught them to add 10% to it just to cover for inflation from the year before. And when it was all said and done, they all three piped up in the back seat. But Dad, that means we don't have enough to go here and do this too. And I said, you know what? You all decide where we're going at the very end and which one of the activities that you want. I can't remember now exactly where it was, but it was something in Nashville. But that's unfair. I said, that's life. That's how much money we have, and that's what we're going to spend, and we're not spending any more than that. Now you help make the decisions instead of me. If you don't teach them that it doesn't grow on trees, they're going to constantly expect you to put more out than what God has given you provision to live by. One of the others that is just fabulous is Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey. Many of our churches are using this today. And it is a wonderful outreach because you can have these classes on Monday or Tuesday or whatever nights you don't have service. And you can invite people from your community and they get used to your church people and it goes in cycles, and after you've had a complete cycle of 12, 13 lessons, take a few weeks break, start it over again, advertise it in your community, and when you help families get out of debt, you help solve stress and marriage problems and issues, and you love them, and you can win them to the Lord. You can make this an outreach to your community besides helping your own families. Here is some of the information from the Maximum Generosity, Brian Kluth. He has biblical resources and training. He has daily Bible readings on 40 generosity and financial topics. He has weekly financial worksheet projects to help people assess their income, their lifestyle, their assets, their giving. Weekly discussion questions for your personal, family, small group, or Sunday school use. Articles on giving, tithing, ways to increase your giving, personal stories, matching grants, just all kinds of information. He has biblical insights for preaching and teaching. His quips and quotes and statistics are just fabulous. And that'll just give you a little idea of what some of the pages look like. I really would encourage you to spend some time looking at that and deciding what would God allow you or feel good that God would want you to do in teaching your families in your church about money management. I'm going to go through this real quick. He even has some things about focusing on your income. What money is coming, what money is coming in from where? That's kind of clunky, but honor the Lord by giving him the first part of your income. The purpose of tithing is to teach you always to put God first in your lives. And he has a lot of scriptures that go through all of that. Focusing on your life, where is your money going? Many of us don't even have a clue where all of our money is going. What do you have? What assets do you have? And what ministries and projects do you care about and want to support? So we have a list of seminar teachers that are able to come to your assembly, or we can help you get connected with Crown Ministries or with Financial Peace University. We're hoping to set up a sort of a commitment with both of those groups to market some of it from our stewardship department, and I think it'll be helpful, but you can go to them directly and get the assistance that you need. The second bale of hay tonight is talking about gift and estate planning. I do this all over the United States, and we have trained some others to do it because it is a very important part of our future. The question I ask you is, what will change your church finances in the future? Would anybody like to know that? Maybe you wouldn't. What is the financial future? Well, the generational numbers are like this. There are 48 million mature generation people living. These are people retired. There are 81 million baby boomers and 38 million Xers. Now, the 81 million boomers and the 38 million Xers that are working, our Social Security money is paying for the 48 million mature generations' Social Security. Now, what's going to happen when the 41 million mature pass off the scene and all of the baby boomers have moved up to the mature area? And the X generation, it's going to fall mainly on their shoulders to provide the Social Security to pay for us baby boomers. Now, you are hearing the problems mentioned from Congress about Social Security, but this is the figures of why it's going to be a problem. Because some of us baby boomers in the X generation, we're complaining now about the taxes. But I guarantee you, us baby boomers are going to expect the next generation to make sure we get paid through our Social Security years. Look at the statistics there, and you figure out for yourselves how much the taxes are going to increase for the next working generation after us baby boomers. How's that going to affect your church income? Because you understand, it is the disposable income that they're giving of to fund Christmas for Christ and foreign missions. And so you see, immediately we've got a crisis coming up. Now, I want to point out something else. Over 44 million abortions have taken place. We have literally aborted the baby boomer generation that approved abortion. We have aborted our own Social Security retirement. We have killed 44 plus million workers that would have been producing income in the United States of America and causing our economy to soar. So we're going to face some issues. And you see why I'm passionate about this is we must get all of our financial houses in order, and we must do what we should to help our own work of the kingdom before the Lord returns. The economy, 75% of it is driven by retail. Disposable income, there's a spending wave. I don't know how to do a bell curve on there, or I would have done a bell curve and show you that the disposable income of the baby boomers started in 1996, the first ones, and then it's going to reach its peak in year 2011, and then more and more of the baby boomers are going to start retiring, and you remember the X generation is going to be paying a bunch more taxes. So the real disposable income is going to finally end in the year 2026. And if you'll understand when Social Security, when they're talking about it, that's the year that they're giving, that they don't think it's going to survive after that. It's going to be bankrupt. Why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you that we have, we can do a lot between now and the year 2026, but all of a sudden we're going to find our churches in horrible financial crisis because it's going to take everything that mankind makes just to support our own society, let alone reach out to win the world. Now, I'm not a prophet of doom. Just being honest. We've got to do something. Everyone say we've got to do something. And if we're going to endow the local church or the evangel to your community in this generation, we must also accomplish two major tasks. We need to change our paradigm about stewardship. I recommend to every pastor here that you come up with some sort of a teaching cycle annually that your church is taught about good stewardship principles, not sacrifice only. They need to have good planning. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I have learned in going to congregations where pastors encourage their people to get an education. You see, many years ago, we were all farmers in this nation. And you just carve off a little section of land and you give it to your kids and they farmed it and everybody lived off of the land. And then came along the industrial generation. They started up all the factories and a lot of folks left the farm and they went to the factories. And finally Henry Ford said, why don't you invest a little bit of your extra money and buy stock in Ford Motor Company? And it started proliferating that people started living through industry. But today, what's happening to industry? It's leaving. Everything is based upon economies of finance. And for those who do not get a decent education, they're going to be making minimal wage. And guess what that does to your giving level in your church? The churches that I go to, and some of you may not like me saying this, but I think you can have a sanctified mind. Those who are encouraging their people to go on and get better education, not only are they having more disposable income in their church to make a difference to reach their community, guess what? Those people are working in a different strata, and who are they winning? They're winning the people that they rub shoulders with. I don't think it's wrong to win the people on the other side of the tracks as well as the side of the tracks that they used to say the church was on. Why don't we win the whole city, folks? But pastors where I travel that are also encouraging education are finding that they're winning all levels of people of society. We're seeing more and more doctors and attorneys, and yeah, attorneys can be saved too. Business owners. And there's nothing wrong with teaching our people how to have a good education. We need to change our paradigm about stewardship. And then how to make large gifts and how to have estate planning a spiritual matter before it becomes a mechanical matter. When I go into a church and teach, I spend almost the first half of the seminar teaching from what the Word of God has to say about God being the owner of all. We don't own a thing, folks. We're just managers of it. Has anyone here ever yet seen a U-Haul trailer follow the hearse to the cemetery? It isn't going to happen, folks. We leave it all behind. We need to plan what would God be pleased with us doing, leaving it to whom and for what. And so we talk about it, we make it a spiritual matter before it becomes a mechanical matter. If we're going to endow the evangel in this generation, we must change our paradigm about giving. Cash is no longer enough. How many of you pastors realize there's not enough cash in the folks' pocketbooks and checking accounts to meet your vision? Remember I said a while ago, less than 90% is cash that people have. The other 90% plus is in their home, their retirement, insurance, rental property, investments, etc. We need gifts of net worth to make a difference for the kingdom. There are 3 endowments in your church and the kingdom. First is the spiritual. I saw some of you dancing and shouting, thanking God for your spiritual endowment. Anybody glad for the spiritual endowment God gave you? Sure we are. I'm also thankful for the human endowment. I'm thankful for Brother Putnam. I'm thankful for your district board. I'm thankful for all you pastors. I'm thankful for you wonderful mothers and fathers who have taught your families and lived right. But there is another endowment, and that is the financial. If you don't have the financial endowment, the spiritual and the human can get pretty discouraged. We have to have the financial endowment to make it all stand together. And I believe the window of opportunity is now. I believe that there is a divine veil over charitable tax codes. It's the largest transfer of capital wealth now taking place. And I believe God has a purpose to using the United States of America for revival. Someone said the college in Boston did a research in 1999, and they predict that baby boomers are going to inherit $10.4 trillion. That sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? How much is that? Well, if you could count, I missed the word count, dollar bills at the rate of 1 per second, it would take 329,557 years to count that much money. It's $41,600 for each U.S. citizen, and it would nearly pay the national debt twice. That's what's getting ready to be transferred to the next generation in America. Distribution, 1/3 of it's going to 1% of the wealthiest. Another third to 9%, and the last third is going to the remaining 90%. And that's where many of us probably, most likely, sure, are. Where are the assets? Well, it's in real estate, in stocks, in bonds. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has gone from a little over 1,000 in 1981 when Ronald Reagan was president to this afternoon at 1:10 p.m. It was 12,306. A lot of those folks who had stock back in 1981, and that wasn't all that long ago, look how their value has multiplied. We have some folks in our ranks. I've been helping too many folks that with their estate planning to tell you, you think some of your folks have nothing, and that's not true. if you'd teach stewardship instead of giving. They wouldn't feel like they were giving their last dollar. Instead, they would feel like, I want to do something for the kingdom. Oh, quiet. There are two estate problems created by growth of net worth. The first is how to turn appreciated net worth into cash flow. I had a man about, 2 years ago, matter of fact, this month or next month, that made a commitment for a project I was involved in for almost $19,000. And he and his wife invited my wife and I to come over to their house, and we stayed in their guest house. And when it was all done, he said, while you're packing your bags, my wife and I will sit down and we'll write you a check out for what we made a commitment for the pledge. So we went and packed our bags, put them in the car. We drove up to their house, and I went in, and there were 2 or 3 checkbooks laying around the end of the dining room table. And he said, why don't you just have a seat? We're having a little problem here. He said, you know, Brother Drury, because you've helped us with our estate plan, we have plenty of assets, but we don't have any cash. We're just trying to figure out where to get it from. Now, these are millionaires. But people have a problem with their net worth is one thing, but their cash flow isn't always there because it's invested in real estate or stocks and bonds. And these folks said to me, you know what, we're just going to write this out so you can go on down the road, and if you'll save it until about Wednesday next week, we'll cash in something and we'll make sure, because we made this commitment and we're going to make sure it's good. I get a call Monday night, Brother Drury, put that check in the bank. I said, okay, I'm assuming something happened. Oh, man, did something happen. He told of 3 major sales that had happened that morning, and that afternoon he had somebody who had bought some property from him 3 or 4 years before, never paid for it, and they finally decided to have a right spirit about it. They were just going to let it rest, and even though they thought about taking them to a small claims court, and an attorney calls and said, if you'll come to my office at 2 this afternoon, I have a $113,000 check here to pay off what these folks have owed you for several years. He said, put that check in the bank. God has provided again. Now, what is it that you're teaching? You're teaching stewardship that some of us heard Brother S.G. Norris many years ago. He said, what happens if the Dead Sea is the Dead Sea because nothing flows through? But if you want to put it in your hand and let it flow through, God keeps on putting more in your hand because you become a conduit. That's what stewardship's all about. It's not about how much you can give. It's about stewardship. Well, this family has been blessed over and over again because they're willing to be that conduit. So how do you transfer net worth to the future generation in a protected way without losing everything in taxes? And we have a way of helping them. And so we do it through what I call the estate design approach versus planned giving. Estate design is this way. Evelyn and I built a house when we were in Tupelo, drove our kids crazy, going from place to place, looking at all these plans. And then we came up with what we thought we wanted, and the architect put together some blueprints. And then we took the blueprints to the builder. What we do in our teaching is that we give them an idea how to get their financial matters that God has trusted them with in order, and then we sit down with them and we work up a blueprint, and then they take it to their attorney, their own attorney, to build it. So we call it the estate design. How do you design your estate to take good care of your family? In 1 Timothy 5:8, he who cares not for his own, and remember I said over 70% don't have a plan? Nothing's going to come to your church. I think we as ministers and pastors have a responsibility to teach our people how to take good care of their families. If the focus is on individual, it's not focused on the United Pentecostal Church or your local assembly when we come. The approach is a service. It's not a fundraising. And the access is to all of their information to help them make good total decisions instead of just partial decisions. And there are prospects as everyone in your congregation. It's not limited to just a few. And so you say, oh, most of my congregation have absolutely nothing. You know what? They may have nothing when it comes to this world's goods much except some things that amount to emotional value. Grandma's quilts, grandpa's tools. Do you know more arguments happen when people pass away from the sentimental things than happens from the money? We come in and we talk about how to make sure they have good plans so that their kids are still hugging each other 30 days after you're dead. So it isn't a matter of money. We approach it from a total stewardship, whatever God has entrusted you with. Anybody here have children under the age of 18? Would you raise your hands? You know what? If you don't have an estate plan, guess what happens if both of you die before the kids turn 18? The state decides where they're going to live. Your children are the greatest thing that God has put in your hand to manage until they're out on their own. We talk about guardianship, how you choose a guardian for your children, how you have enough life insurance to finish taking care of your kids. Remember 1 Timothy 5:8, he who provides not for his own. You need to have enough life insurance to put in some sort of a trust. How is that trust managed? Who manages that trust? Who takes care of the finance? Do you want the same person raising your kids to manage the money? Are you kidding? You talk about people accusing you of spending someone else's money. We talk about all those things. We talked about the management of what God has trusted you with, and what if you become incapacitated? You end up in a nursing home. You have Alzheimer's. Who's going to manage your business affairs? What if you're in an accident like Sister Melissa Anderson and their family has begged me, please tell everybody what happened to Melissa? She came to me and said, Brother Drury, I want to meet with you. We set a date for October 31st after we were at the conference in Toronto. I'll never forget it. We set it up for October 31st. She was going to be in St. Louis. And she said, I've got some things that I know aren't quite in order, my estate plan. Would you please tell me what to do? She went home from General Conference and 3 days later drove in front of a dump truck, and she never ended up out of the hospital or the nursing home. She was never able to pay another bill. She was never able to make any health care decisions for herself. She had no durable power of attorney to take care of her business. She had no living will for anyone to make decisions. And it was a horrible experience for her family. They couldn't get into her house. They couldn't get her purse out of the car where it had been in a wreck. They weren't able to do anything. They weren't able to make health care decisions. They had to go to court and get emergency conservatorship, and then they had to pay again to go through the whole process again, plus all the time in between that was confusing. You see, we have responsibility of our own life to make sure there are good provisions. So whether you have any money, that is not the issue. We talk about the stewardship of what God has given us. How do we manage those things? So when we teach, it's everyone. It's not just those who have money, because that isn't what stewardship is. This is sort of a beginning of a seminar. I teach on the estate design process. We establish the biblical fundamentals. We ask and answer the question, what is God's plan of stewardship for my estate? We talk about the scriptures very clearly, that every animal of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills, and the world is mine, and how much of it? You don't own a thing. I hate to tell you that. No, I don't. You don't own a thing. What is God's plan? God's the owner of all, and he what? Trusts you. Maybe he doesn't give us any more because he can't. You said that. Can he trust you to be a good steward? There are 5 elements in a trust, and I'm going to go through these real quick. The first is the grantor, the person who establishes the trust, and in this case, God's the grantor. The second is corpus. That's the stuff. Anybody here moved in the last 5 years? Would you raise your hand? Did you have a bunch of stuff? When we moved to St. Louis, Evelyn says, I'm going to have a garage sale. I said, I'm leaving. She came, when I got home, she said, Steve, guess what? I made $480 on this garage sale. I said, Evelyn, Do you know how much it cost us for you to make that $480 on all that stuff that we bought that we never even needed? You see, we waste a lot of money on stuff. Moving right along. The trustee is the person responsible for managing it, and you are what? Everyone say legally responsible. You believe God's going to hold you legally responsible for how you manage your time, your talent, and your treasures? I think he is. I think he's going to come back someday and say to you, Brother Caskey, what did you do with the time I gave you on this earth? What did you do with the talents I gave you? What did you do with the treasure I gave you? How did you manage it? How did you steward those? And guess what? There's terms in here. And then there is a contract in here. I want to be one of his people. Anybody here want to be one of his people? Well, the biblical principle, again, is dependence. Who's dependent upon you? Brother Richardson, I look at you and the Whites. You know what? You folks are dependent upon the family of God. My children, my wife, some of their needs, all of her needs are dependent upon me. And the scripture makes it clear I'm in trouble if I don't do a good job of it. The biblical motivation of distribution of your estate is love. For God so loved that he what? You know what? When you love, you give. Anybody here have grandkids? All they have to do is say, Papa, Grandma, and guess what? You know, I found out before I got married, I had money in there, and afterwards it was replaced with pictures when I had kids. Because all they do is come up to you and hug you. And I used to tell the kids, if you will give your mom and dad a hug and a kiss 2 or 3 times a day, you're going to have everything you want. For God so loved that he gave. And if I give all my possessions and do not have love, you know what? God gives you love for certain ministries. Oh. You see, when we go to churches, we never talk about that you ought to give to this ministry or that ministry except your local church. We teach that. Because every one of us have a different passion for a different thing. You ask me, what is your passion, Steve? It's new beginnings right now. Now, we've gotten our will to give to foreign missions and home missions. But I love putting babies in arms of couples who can't have children. I'm telling you what, if you ever are there for that kind of an experience, you are never, ever the same. But you know what? That's my passion. Some of you have a passion to reach Africa. Wherever God has sent you, your particular community, Long Island. Wherever God has sent you, that's your passion. And people in your church have a passion. So you teach it from the stewardship standpoint, and guess what? God tells them what he wants it to go to take care of their family and the kingdom when they leave here. And the biblical principle is 1 Corinthians 4, 1 and 2. In this case, moreover, it is required of stewards that one be found, what? Trustworthy or faithful. So we have to ask and answer the question, what's God's plan of stewardship for my estate? Then we have to believe and practice the truth that people are more important than dollars and possessions. It's not money that's important, it's people. I want my kids hugging each other 30 days after I'm gone. Now, the third is distribute and use every legal and ethical means to distribute your estate with the least amount of cost and delay. And so you want to get what you want, where you want it, when you want it, and how you want it to the glory of God. And this leads to step 2. So I spent the first half of my seminar talking about the biblical matters. And then we do the nuts and the bolts. Some of you will like this and some of you won't. Somebody once said, always drink upstream from the herd. Never look straight up at a bird. And if you get bucked off, get back on. And don't squat with your spurs on. It's common sense things. that we talk about. Some of you will like me, some won't. We talk about how you title your property to make sure it happens. Now, you folks here, whether it's in an individual's name only, tenants in common, tenants with rights of survivorship, tenants by entirety, you live in a common property state, and your distribution is a little bit different sometimes than others. So we teach upon how things are titled to make sure happens what you want to have happen. We talk about distribution at death, how things will pass through a will. We talk about how it happens by law. It doesn't matter what you have in your will. We help people understand all of the things that God has trusted them with is in 6 different boxes. How that is managed by a will, and how you get everything down through letters of instructions or to your family or to the ministry that you love, and how you have durable powers of attorney, etc. We talk about why you have a will. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all of that. But we give a clear explanation of reasons that every person should have a will and some of the components of a will. We talk about the value of a trust. Should your children survive you and you pass away before they turn 18, how you can postpone the distribution except for their education, health, and welfare needs. How you provide equal distribution after all of them have gotten their education. You put it under a third-party control to eliminate confusion. And then you provide, should one of your children become incompetent, say you're all in an accident, one becomes mentally challenged and the others are able to get an education, you need to save that money for the one who is incompetent instead of giving it out to the others. So we talk about all the things to do well in providing for your families. How to select a guardian for your children. And I have a long story about why you don't select someone who's older, who's never had kids, because you need to go through that. If you've never raised kids, you get teenagers all of a sudden in your home. I'm not going to go into that. I admire grandparents who raise kids, but you know what? Christmas is wonderful. I like the lights on Christmas trees, and maybe you don't believe in them, but the best lights at Christmas are the taillights when the grandkids are leaving, you know? I mean, you love them being there, but it's one of those times that enough is enough, you know? So I admire anybody here who is raising your own grandkids, but not me. I've been there, done that. You need to find someone who has the same values that you have, going to the same church. I had kids sent all the way from the mansion to the mansion, and I'm glad that we did. But I want to tell you, they not only lost their parents, they lost their pastor, they lost their school that they were in, they lost all of their relatives, they lost all of their friends at church, and it almost destroyed them because somebody in that local church needs to finish trying to keep their lives together. I could preach on that one, folks. I also talk about durable powers of attorney. You realize people 75 plus 1 in 3 are going to become incompetent to manage their business affairs. By 85 plus 1 in 2. Healthcare decisions, you need living wills, advance directives, and then you need letters of instruction for your household goods and personal effects. I also talk about the bucket. Anybody here ever use a bucket for anything to carry stuff in? Well, I liken this to a living trust. You put a pencil line through your title of everything, and you put bucket. Well, Evelyn's in my bucket says Stephen M. and Evelyn L. Drury Living Trust. And we have everything in our bucket. And if we become incapacitated, now we can sell because we're the trustees of that bucket. We can sell the assets out of there if we need the cash and put it in our own pocket. If we become incapacitated and we drop our bucket, somebody has instructions in there of how to manage our business, how to carry it on, how to take care of everything. And then if we die and you got it, you kick the bucket. There's instructions in there of how it is to be carried on, but when you die, the government doesn't know how much you own. It is protected from going through probate. We teach all of those kinds of things. And we teach why a revocable living trust is good, and I'm not going to spend time on that. But I talk about how estate taxes are optional taxes. You can pay it, you can postpone it, or you can avoid it. We talk about how specially designed charitable trusts work, that during a lifetime or at death, you can take some of your assets and put them behind a fence. And I could give you a whole story about the apple orchard, that God gave the apple tree to mankind to grow apples. And eventually, as man grew apples and they fed everybody in the family, and they grew more and more apple trees. There were more apples than what they needed, so they started selling them to their neighbors and to faraway countries. And then all of a sudden, people started invading the country, stealing the apples. So mankind said, give me government. So government came into existence. And how do you pay for government? Well, you have to give some of the apples to pay for government, and that's income taxes. And although we don't like it, guess what's going to happen next year? The tree's going to grow more apples. But you know what the government likes to do now is they like to have estate taxes, and they cut down your orchard, and they get some of the apple trees, and your family loses some of their ability to make the money that they need, and so therefore they have less ability. So what we do is we teach them how to protect their assets and not have to pay the government for that. Is that okay? Now, I love America, but they do things and spend money on things I don't agree with, like abortion, a few other things. And during the lifetime, this is called a charitable trust. The apples go to the ministry. At the end of the trust, when it collapses, it goes to the personal beneficiaries. So you can have a trust. You can put assets in it at death or during lifetime. You get a tax write-off for the assets that go into it. You can have a stream of income for the ministry. This is a charitable lead trust. It goes to the ministries up front. And it'll go for 10, 12, 15, up to 20 years or more. And then when that trust is over with, they call it collapsing, and all the assets come back to your family members. So some folks who have large assets and their net worth is growing, they can give money now by protecting it and still give it to their family at the end of their life or at the end of the trust. They're multiplying, kind of a spiritual understanding of multiplying what God has given you. You can also buy life insurance from the charitable trust to pay for it, and your kids can get the money. Let's say you only live 5 years. Your kids can get the money of the life insurance right now, tax-free. The money is still in there to finish giving to the ministry, and at the end, when it collapses, guess what? The kids still get the rest of it. We can do specially designed charitable trusts with life insurance for your retirement plans. Do you realize that 70+% of your assets in your retirement when you die are going to disappear in taxes between it coming out at your death to pay income tax, estate tax. When your kids get it, they have to pay gift tax. And 72% of your retirement plan can be gone. We can show you how to structure it. Now, you can roll it over to your kids, but statistics tell us 90% of them take it out and do what? Spend it. What you can do is you can put it in a charitable trust, and you can make it give money for a period of years equal to what it was in smaller segments, and they pay less income tax, and then it's the whole corpus is still there to give to ministry until the Lord returns. We have charitable gift annuities in the United Pentecostal Foundation. You can transfer assets or give cash, and we will commit to you to give you income quarterly, or in some cases even monthly, for the rest of you and your spouse's life, up to 2 people. You get a portion of a gift tax or a gift off of your income taxes. You get income for the rest of your lives. And then at the end of your life, it goes to the ministry. For example, we have a couple in a certain state. He is now 84. She is 73. No, I'm sorry, 83 and 74. They were never privileged to have children. They actually didn't get married till he was 53 and she was 44. And they have multi. They have purchased charitable gift annuities And this particular family has $100,000 per gift annuity. They've gotten a $40,000 write-off on their taxes annually for each time they've done this. They get income every quarter equal to 6.8% for the rest of their life. And the reason they're transferring it is because they sure aren't getting that with CDs. Plus, they have to worry about managing it. We manage it for them. They get income for the rest of their life. They got a tax deduction. And guess who's getting the money that's left over in the pool after they die? Their local church. What a wonderful tool to help people not worry about their income. And what are we doing in the foundation? I think we've been making about 10% on it. We're paying them 6.8. So hopefully by the time they pass away, that church is going to get a lot more money than what the folks even put in there. You see why we're getting excited about what we are offering our folks to make a difference for the kingdom. And here kind of a little summary of the rates that we have. And we have a program that we can generate a proposal to anybody who is interested in one. So we establish the fundamentals. We help them become familiar with legal terms, basic tax rules, and planning tools available. Then I always stay at least one more day. Sometimes I've stayed for 2 days afterwards, working one-on-one with individuals in appointments and help them gather their data for a qualified plan. We then help them seek competent counsel. We only do the design and then have them get with an attorney to build their estate plan. We help them with the 4 Ps. Who are the people who are dependent upon them and that they love and that by tradition they give to? And you know, just because it's traditional to give to all of your family members, if they're alcoholics and druggies, I'm not so sure that's where God wants you to transfer all of your assets that He has trusted you with. Just a thought. Property, what you have, how it is titled, when it was purchased, the cost basis, what is the present value, how much can you avoid in capital gains tax with good plans. Today, while you're living, how can you manage it? Tomorrow, how can you manage it when you're gone? Who are your planners, your attorney, your accountant, your life insurance agent, your trust officer, investment advisor? I remind you again, this one study shows $41 trillion coming in estate transfers, yet 70% without a will or a trust. Now, I don't have all the statistics for 2006, but 2005, you can see the months I went out teaching. The total of estates is 85 million, counting their life insurance and their assets. I want to show you I actually went to a couple churches twice. Just to the local churches in future gifts, about 11 churches, $7.4 million in their estate plans that would never have happened had we not taught stewardship of what God has trusted them with in this life. In the foundation, and we handed you the brochure. If you'll notice, those that have one on the inside, you'll see that we have several endowments already set up. Since this was printed last year, we have more than doubled our assets. Not a lot, but we're just in our beginning. But we have set up some new endowments, a couple for ladies' ministries. We have in future assets for foreign mission through estate plans was $4.5 million in the last 2 years. Future gifts for home missions has been $2.5 million in future years. New Beginnings has been included. N.A. Urshan Endowment Fund for Urshan Graduate School. Family and personal endowments have been set up. Ladies Ministry, Division of Education. We have donor advised funds. We have a couple in Louisiana. They buy houses, renovate them, sell them, take out the cash that they put in to begin with, give the money to their donor advised fund, because when they reach the age of retirement, they want to have $500,000 in their donor advised fund so that each year they can say, when Brother Richardson came along, he touched my heart. I'd like to give $50,000 out of my donor advised fund. They tell us, and their next generation tells us, how to give that money, when, and to whom, and how much. We have charitable gift annuities, as I told you, scholarships. We have charitable trusts that are in the process of being set up. We teach people to if nothing else, buy an inexpensive life insurance policy while you're young. Put the church's name on it as the beneficiary. retirement plan gifts, life estate gifts, outright gift of cash and appreciated assets such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and real estate. So we are helping churches. And I hope that some of you invite someone from the stewardship department to come to your church and do a seminar. We teach that everyone should tithe of their estate to the local assembly, because I've been around long enough to know pastors have on their forehead WIIFM. What's in it for me? And that's all right, because we want to teach your people to tithe of their estate. Let me just ask you a few questions here real quick, and then I'm going to close and not talk about retirement. How many of you want to be saved in here? Whew, boy, thank God. How many believe you have to pay your tithes to be saved? What happens to the rest of you back there? You know, what I tell people is this, and I've done it for many years. I did this at the Children's Mansion when I traveled all the time. How many of us have a piece of property that's worth more than it was when we bought it? How many of us have retirement that somebody put the money in that it's in our name, but we've never paid, it's never come into our hands yet, but we've never paid tithes on it? You count your life insurance. It's going to be a big amount when you die, if you have any. I just asked the question, have you paid the tithes on your increase? Now how many of you want to be saved? You see, it's going to leave your assets, but you're already going to be gone. It's not going to hurt. I think it's a good faith measure that you want to make sure that you have done what you're supposed to do by tithing of your estate to your local assembly. I haven't had a pastor yet where I went complain about that for some reason. We help individuals with their estate planning, 300 plus families in the last 2 years. We help with gift planning. We had a lady who's in her 80s in Florida that she and her husband started home missions churches. And she called me one day, Brother Drury, I want to do something, and can you help me out? And so I helped her out, and here's what she did. She said, I have a wonderful sister and brother-in-law. They're also in their 80s, and if I die, I want to help them. So I think after visiting with you, here's what I want to do. I want to put my commercial annuities, I want it to create an endowment in the United Pentecostal Foundation with all those monies when I die, and I want to give it to home missions to help build home missions churches. But then I want to take all of my house, what it's worth, and I want it to buy a charitable gift annuity, and I want the earnings from that to go to my sister and brother-in-law for as long as they live, and then when they die, I also want that money then transferred into the endowment in mine and my husband's name to help home missions. So you see, she's taking care of her loved ones. She's fulfilling 1 Timothy 5 and 8, but making sure that the kingdom of God and avoiding estate taxes. Now that's a thought, isn't it? Charitable gift annuities, donor advised funds, endowments. You notice we have an endowment from someone in Wisconsin. I'm not going to talk about all that right now. But for the long term, you can partner with the United Pentecostal Foundation in stewardship. You can provide estate planning services for gifts for your church. You can have in your church bulletin, have you included the Wisconsin district or your church in your estate plan? There's nothing wrong with doing that. You're seeing envelopes from home missions now. Have you remembered home missions in your estate plan? Have you, any of you seen that? Guess who encouraged them to do that? If you were on our mailing list when I was in Tupelo, you saw it all the time. And guess what? They're telling me today. They're being blessed by it because of you plant the seed. Pastors, you need to plant the seed for people to include your church in their estate planning. The Tennessee district has set up an endowment for their campground, and they're on a trek to, I've trained somebody in their district, and they're going from church to teach these estate planning seminars, and they're having a brochure to hand out for people to remember their campground with permanent funding to maintain the campground, and it's managed in the foundation. You can have endowments for your local church, and I'm setting up one now for a church in Louisiana. You can have scholarship funds, and I'm not going to give you the last bale of hay right now. I hope you've learned something here. There's a lot to what we're trying to do. But you know, I have a purpose that I believe. I believe God is going to give us more assets if we'll manage them well. But sometimes we have to be taught. When I retire and when I pass away, I gave this saying to Brother Haney, and he put it in here in his opening remarks. Nelson Henderson said, "The true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit." I may not enjoy this, but you know what? If we can have 50, 60 million in an endowment for foreign missions and 30, 40 million in home missions, and all administration is taken care of, not one missionary have to travel 1 mile to pay for any business expenses. And that isn't a lot of money, folks. We just have to teach our people that they can do that. How many more missionaries do you think, Brother Richardson, we could have on the field if we didn't have to do that? It'd be unbelievable. Our missionaries wouldn't have to travel so long. They'll get back to their fields earlier. And you know what? I am believing that as we teach this across our fellowship, when Christmas for Christ money comes, every penny will go to help build churches instead of any of the administration expense. And you know that's the only consistent offering the Home Missions has. That's the reason Brother Mostyn is coming on, to tell you how many 44 other ministries they have going, and it's all being paid for from Christmas for Christ. And if some folks knew some of those passionate ministries, they would give to some of those direct, and more money would go from Christmas for Christ direct to Home Missions pastors. There are a lot of things that we need to take a fresh look at, but I'm glad that God has called us to be good leaders, and part of that is in good stewardship. I hope you still love me after I've pointed out a few things. Tomorrow, if we have time, I will talk about retirement planning for pastors. I'm sure every last one of you are on target. Brother Putnam, God bless you. Brother Durham.